This is where the Cosby Show star Malcolm-Jamal Warner's life suddenly and shockingly ended over the weekend. You can
trying to convince me I'm insane. They were trying to get me to take psychotic medication. Yeah. Like I'm sitting around, I was stressed out, but the people that were telling me I was insane, I believe that they knew what was going on.
You know that split second when a headline hits like a punch to the ribs and your breath stalls because your brain is racing to make sense of something that shouldn't be real? That's where we're starting tonight. On a sunbright beach where joy flipped into panic and a legacy that raised a generation suddenly sits in the crosshairs of rumor, grief, and the internet's hunger for patterns.
He didn't kill himself. He was dragged down. He's been trying to quit drugs on and off. But addiction isn't easy to beat. You think it's simple. But holding on is a whole different battle. He could handle the pressure, and he wanted to keep going. But you know what? No matter how strong you are, when people are whispering behind your back, tearing you down every day, it's no surprise if one day you just can't hold on anymore.
If you're here for the full, fearless breakdown, told in the language of celebrity culture, equal parts empathy and edge, smash like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment with your gut take right now, because your voice shapes our next chapter and we don't gatekeep receipts on this channel. With that, let's pull back the curtain on the 10 most circulated angles the internet is obsessing over and follow them like breadcrumbs, not because speculation is proof, but because understanding what people believe is the first step to finding what's true. And because this story isn't just about a moment in the ocean, it's about power, image, timing, and how fame turns grief into a public seance where everyone thinks they hear a whisper.
I feel like in a lot of instances, I was deliberately being put through stress because, when you're a guy that generates money,
yeah,
people have a vested interest in controlling.
Yeah.
What? The actor Malcolm-Jamal Warner has died. First of all, rest in peace to him. He seemed like a very stand-up guy, positive role model. But I looked into this whole thing and it gets weird. First, let's start with the age he died at, which is 54. 5 plus 4 is 9. You guys know about my 9 videos, and 9 is the number of completion. But also, the show that he was famous for, The Cosby Show, in Gematria equals up to 54 as well. Then let's go to the date he actually died on, which is July 20th, which is the 201st day of the year. Yeah, can anybody tell me why The Cosby Show ran for a total of 8 seasons, equaling 201 episodes?
The first current, tugging the timeline, is the human one. A family day by the sea, the heat shimmering off the sand, waves that look more postcard than Predator, and that hush then scream pivot when a rip current snaps the illusion in half. Bystanders sprint, someone points, someone prays, and in the space of a minute, the world shrinks to a clock and a chest, and a voice shouting for help against wind and water. People who know that coastlines swear the surf can turn on you as fast as a mood swing, and they paint the physics undertow dragging you diagonally, the panic of swimming straight against it when you're supposed to move sideways, the way even strong lungs lose their negotiation with a riptide. That version of events is brutally simple, and that simplicity is exactly why some viewers don't accept it, because it means there's no villain to point at, no hidden hand to shake a fist at, just an awful minute that doesn't care how beloved you are. Still, the details of that minute became the skeleton of 1,000 threads.
So, this was troublesome.
Yeah.
So I'm not taking this medicine, man, because I know these people be trying to control you or maybe discredit you. I was afraid,
But you were stressed out. That's why.
There's no question. But it's very stressful for someone to constantly walk behind you and say, you're insane.
1,000 what ifs. 1,000 private arguments in comment sections about who was standing where, how far out they went, whether the signs were visible, whether there were lifeguards, whether the second swimmer can fill the silence later. And as those questions stacked up, the collective grief did what grief always does online. It tried to turn uncertainty into a narrative because a story, even a messy one, hurts less than chaos. Then the clip resurfaced the quiet, steady interview where he talks about legacy like it's a muscle you train, about refusing caricatures and bad stereotypes, and about guarding his name like it's something he has to hand down polished and uncracked. He smiles when he says it, like a man who already made peace with the cost of saying no when yes is quicker and louder, and that calm rattled people more than any speech could. Suddenly, the old conversations about integrity became a lens through which the tragedy was watched, a frame that made the accident feel like a mismatch to the character, and that mismatch is the spark that lights rumor. Fans don't say it with malice. They say it with the urgency of people who loved the work and believed the man, who want the universe to honor the deal you make when you choose the hard road. This is where parasocial love turns into detective work. Someone remembers a quote, someone else remembers a project he turned down. Another says he was meticulous, he wouldn't take unnecessary risks, and like that, you've got a theory built from admiration, not evidence. It feels right, it comforts, it travels fast. Right behind that came the numerology wave, because nothing in internet culture is more irresistible than a number wearing a prophecy. Dates became digits. Digits got stacked into patterns. Patterns got stitched to episode counts and anniversaries, and 100 coincidental alignments until coincidence looked like choreography you could hum. People will swear a certain number keeps showing up like a signature in the margins, and once you're told to notice it, you find it everywhere. Like when someone mentions a red car and the highway turns into a parade. The seduction here isn't that numbers prove anything, it's that numbers feel clean, like rails you can hold while the floor tilts. They give you a villain you can't see but can count, which is almost better for the conspiracy inclined. Even folks rolling their eyes end up listening because the confidence of the presentation is intoxicating tight edits, bold fonts, or that midnight radio voice that makes everything sound like a code just cracked. The reasonable take is that grief is a chaos engine and patterns soothe, but the honest take is that patterns are entertaining, and entertainment, for better or worse, is the language we use to metabolize public tragedy. Meanwhile, the industry subplot flared up because fans don't watch a single story anymore. They binge a cinematic universe of parallels. They dragged in the cautionary fable of the comic, who vanished when the numbers got too big and the pressure got too personal, who later described the way concern can be weaponized and advice can feel like a leash, who chose distance over compliance and paid with 1,000 headlines that stamped him unstable before he could speak for himself. People who watched that saga unfold now greet every story like this with a muscle memory of suspicion. A star draws a line, the system pushes back, and the human being in the middle gets turned into a narrative chess piece. Is that what happened here? No one can say, and we won't pretend to, but the echo is loud enough that the audience hears it, whether the room is silent or not. Once you accept that power protects itself, you start seeing power in everything, even the tide, and that's how an ocean becomes a suspect. There's also the modern Gothic thread artists describing fame like a city of vampires. The romance and the rot standing shoulder to shoulder offers that sound like fairy tales with fine print written in shadows. One singer laid it out in myth and metaphor on a live stream, talking about gifts that attract both light and predators, about the fast road that costs a piece of you each time you take it, and the slow road that preserves you but tests you. She didn't accuse, she explained, and the explanation stuck because it offered a map for something people already believed. Set that map beside the calm manifesto about longevity and care, and you get a story that writes itself even if no one puts pen to paper. It's the old desire to believe that choices matter, that saying no is noble and saying yes is dangerous, that the world of velvet ropes is quietly full of traps, and that those traps are sprung when you think you've mastered them. This is less about proof than about vibe. And in the era of vibes, vibe can feel like evidence if you hold it long enough. Add to that the pulp thriller anecdote about a different comic sleeping in Kevlar after a late-night breach, and you've got a tale so cinematic your brain sees the grain of the film, whether or not your heart believes the footnotes. The reason these stories live rent-free isn't that they're verified in public, it's that they're plausible to an audience that's watched fame, chew, and spit out too many people. Once the culture accepts that power can be predatory, the bar for suspicion lowers, and any sudden tragedy can be retrofitted into a cautionary fable. It's not logic, it's mythology, and mythology is sticky. It hangs in the air so that when something awful happens, we inhale it without meaning to and start speaking its language, all the what-ifs and don't you thinks that feel like wisdom in the moment, and only later show their seams. The opposing current is the one surfers and lifeguards will tell you with a shrug that's half warning, half weary. Water doesn't care. It looks calm and then it doesn't, and your instincts betray you at exactly the worst second. Swim straight, you tire, you sink. Swim sideways, you live. And even if you know the rule, panic changes the math. This version is not a cover story, it's a physics story, a tragedy that doesn't require a villain to be devastating. In that light, the questions people ask where the signs were, how fast help arrived, whether the second swimmer can talk about the moment aren't conspiratorial, they're human engineering. Attempts to rebuild a minute that refuses to sit still. But online, everything is a magnifying glass and a megaphone, so humane questions become suspicion by noon. And by evening, suspicion becomes narrative, and by midnight, narrative becomes a choose-your-own-ending thriller that doesn't need corroboration as long as the vibe is compelling. Even so, refusing to shame those questions is crucial because questions are how we walk through fog without falling. We can hold curiosity and compassion at the same time without turning grief into content. Through all of this, the tributes have been the antidote to noise. Colleagues and friends, remembering the small things that never make press releases, the way he paused to listen rather than waiting to speak, how he steadied a set with a joke at the exact right moment, the notes he kept on scripts like a craftsman, the quiet standards he set for younger castmates who took their cues from his patience. Those stories ring louder than any thread because they're textured, not performative. They sound like memory, not PR. And that's why so many fight the random accident label, because nothing about the man felt random. The paradox is cruel. The more intentional a life looks, the more intolerable randomness becomes. So the audience, trained by 1,000 true crime arcs and rise and fall documentaries, keeps waiting for the third act twist. The masked figure, the late reveal. Sometimes the twist is that there isn't one, and that's the twist no one wants. Step back, and the career arc reads like a long game played with a chess player's patience breakout youth fame that could have calcified into a punchline, sidestepped with adult roles chosen for depth rather than noise, a willingness to be present but not thirsty, to be visible without being trapped by nostalgia. He talked about versatility like survival, about making choices that would hold up in 20 years, and you can feel that curation beat by beat across the decades. That discipline is precisely why the rumor engine hums. Integrity in public becomes mystery in private, and mystery is a magnet. It attracts projections, admiration, envy, fear, and those projections are the raw material of gossip. When a life curated that carefully stops mid-sentence, the magnet ramps to maximum and pulls theories like iron filings until there's an outline that looks like certainty. It isn't, but it scratches an itch that facts don't reach in the first weeks. And finally, we land where most of you live, with two hot truths held at once. One says the ocean is a beast that does not bargain, that a minute can be both ordinary and lethal, that loved ones can do everything right and still lose. The other says power protects itself, whispers travel in straight lines, and people who say no sometimes pay unseen taxes. Living between those truths is the cost of loving artists in a culture that turns them into symbols. Here's how we move forward on this channel. We honor the man by keeping his name warm with gratitude, not paranoia. We keep our eyes open for new, on-the-record details without pretending rumors are revelations. We hold space for the questions that mourners need to ask. And we shut the door on narratives that use grief as a stage prop. And we remember that the most radical thing you can do in a moment like this is to care out loud and carefully at the same time. If you're still with me, drop RIP and a memory in the comments to push the algorithm toward love. Tell me which angle pulls you hardest, the physics, the parallels, the numerology, the industry fable and why, and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because if real updates land, we'll be here first. Not to sensationalize, but to clarify. Not to dangle bait, but to deliver story with spine. And until then, hold your people close, respect the ocean, and remember that some legacies aren't a headline. They're a lighthouse you can still see even when the fog is loud.